Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Design Review Board public meeting of May 10th, 2018 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones at this time. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, must fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You will be called to speak on an item as per the chairman's direction. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a particular project in the event of a return for redesign must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent hearings. Current Design Review Board agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and Design Review Board appeals is available from staff. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Arzumanian.
Here.
Board Member Benlian is absent. Board Member Charchian, or Chairman Charchian, is absent as well. Board Member Malikian.
Here.
And Board Member Simonian.
Pleasant.
In the event that we have our chairman absent, we would need to elect a chair pro tem for the meeting. Is there a nomination?
I make a motion to elect Mr. Simonian as the chair.
And is
I'll second.
second, and all in favor?
Yes.
All right, so we have chair pro tem. Thank you, Mr. Simonian. Next is report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before, I believe, and forgive me, I'm going to, there's an issue with the agenda, so apologies. So, yes, thank you so much. Okay. Next would be oral communication cards, so we'll go back to the report regarding posting of the agenda. Oral communication cards, I have not received any, and I don't believe any have been turned in, which then brings us to staff announcements. We have none at this point in time. We hope that the board members were able to review the South Glendale Community Plan that was distributed to all the board members. And again, your comments are requested, and this is still in the comment period. And so I would like to, thank you very much. Okay, back to the report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m., and this would be on May 3rd. And back to the agenda for this evening, we have 4 cases on tonight's agenda. 2 of those cases are being continued. Case number PDR 1802044 for 1026 Bramford Drive, which is an addition to a 2-story single-family residential home. That case is being continued to May the 24th without further public notice. And case number PDR 1800579. This is for a new single-family residence at 1442 Montgomery Avenue. That case is actually being taken off the agenda and continued without further public notice until June 28th, so for 6 weeks. That said, there are 2 remaining cases on tonight's agenda, and I would like to turn the meeting over to Chair Pro Tem Simonian.
Thank you very much, and good evening. We're going to start off with a first case, 1730259. Ms. Toledo, you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, this project is located at 3455 Downing Avenue. The request is for exterior remodel and construction of a new 1,066 square foot second story and new porch areas on the ground floor. The existing 1-story is 1,259 square feet, and it has an existing 380 square foot detached 2-car garage, and the size of the lot is 6,500 square feet. The project includes exterior remodel, the new second story addition, the covered patios, and the new front porch, new colors, materials throughout, and windows, etc. So briefly, the project does have a variance that was that was approved recently, back in November of 2017, as it relates to the increase in height would trigger increasing the setback area, so they got a variance for that to maintain the existing setback along the south side. Regarding the design, staff is recommending return for redesign, and I will briefly go over the reasons why. The project site is located in the R1 FAR District 2 zone. Downing Avenue is located in the Spar Heights area in North Glendale. As it relates to site planning, staff didn't have any concerns really, so the site planning seemed to be consistent with the existing conditions as well as the neighborhood fabric. As it relates to mass and scale, and this is where staff had some concerns and why we're recommending return for redesign, the new second story doesn't appear to relate to the adjacent one-story home. It's out of scale with a predominant one-story neighborhood and the neighborhood pattern, mass, and configuration. Going back to the proportions of the addition, especially at the front and the gables, they're visible from the street, and staff believes that they need further refinement to address the neighborhood fabric. And as going back again to the section regarding scale and proportions, the relationship between that existing bay window at the front and the new dormer above the entry roof don't appear to be complementary. They seem to be too tightly arranged, so staff would like further refinement to restudy that area. And the last item I'd like to highlight would be in your staff report relating to the design and detailing. In general, it appears compatible with this chosen design. The one item, they're just general items to be considered, would be the location of the equipment screening, the trash area, and the downspouts to be located on not only the site, but also downspouts identified on the plans. And also the pitches of the roof, there seem to be several different types of roof pitches, whether it's a 4 and 12, a 5 and 12, and staff is requesting that the board look at that as well to see what we can do in order to reduce that mass and scale that seems to also be triggered by the roof design. We have identified 7 conditions or listed them in the report, and if you have any questions, I'm available to answer them.
Do we have any questions for staff?
Have staff requested a study of the 50% removal or addition?
Not at this time. The applicant was put on notice during our pre-application meetings, and my understanding is that they would be in compliance with the 50% threshold.
Okay.
However, at this point, I would defer to the applicant.
Okay. And does staff have a copy of the window schedule, or I know you were asking for it. Have they provided that before?
No, I don't have that
You don't
at
have
this time.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that, we'll go ahead and open the public portion. Mr. Girgos?
Good evening, Mike Aragus, 2155 Verdugo, number 614, Montrose, 91020. Thank you for taking the time. We're in agreement with the majority of the staff report, except for the couple of the large items, and I want to address those right on. We have one additional letter in addition to the exhibit I have in front of me, which is the owner went around with the plan, and I purposely did it so it had the elevation, had the site plan and floor plan in it. And as you can see, all the red dots are all the adjacent parcels that are, all the adjacent property owners who are in agreement with the project and feel that it is consistent with the property. So you can see it right here. I have the additional letter, which is the neighbor to the north, directly to the north. So within that, I think we can look at, we'll look at the 2 items. One is the appropriateness of the 2-story, and then the second would be the massing and pitches, if you want to sort of group it that way. If you look on the 2-story, I don't know where it went, the 2-story study, there is Two stories at the end of the block, well, at the end of the block. On the upper block, there's two stories. And just past the 300-foot line, there is another 2 stories. So it is not an unusual idea to have a 2-story in that neighborhood at all. I've personally done 3 homes on Buena Vista, which is one street over, and I've done 2 on Rosemary, which is 2 streets over. So it is not unusual. These are small properties, and it really is the only way to expand. It's not, I don't think it's practical to always go out, because you end up on a small lot, you're going to reduce it considerably. So from the very early on, the whole idea was that we were going to do 1.5 stories, which was to try to keep the second floor within the volume of what would be an attic. And within the style, it is absolutely consistent that you would do a steeper pitch so that you could enclose that all. And if you look at the massing, especially from the front, all the telltale aspects of the steeper pitch is to reinforce the idea that it is a single-story roof, that is the fundamental structure. And the ridge height is basically the ridge height you would have on a second story if it had a second story. So it's not that we're really asking for a higher ultimate ridge height, and we're considerably under the allowable ridge height. And then also when we did the massing, even though we went for the variance at 5 feet, we're doing 6'3", so we're doing an additional foot side yard. We've put smaller rooms, a closet and a master bath on the side yard to help with privacy, which staff understood and was in agreement with. But in general, and then the other aspect was the roof pitches. Again, within this style, it is completely consistent to have multiple pitches. That is how you get a shed dormer. You would not have a shed dormer if it was not a different pitch than the main roof. So the multiple pitches are completely within the style, this style structure. So on those items, I think we have good support. There's neighbors here, the owner here wants to speak also, to speak directly to the idea that the 2-story is completely consistent with this block. And that it just comes down to how you feel about that idea. And so with that, I'd like to have the owner come up, Eric.
Do we have any
Speak to the-
questions for that?
Unless you had questions, sorry, if you had questions.
Mr.
Sorry.
Yergos, do you have any building sections other than the one that you provided? Do you have anything else that we can kind of learn about some of these roof lines and everything?
Not with me now, but I'll tell you, the front gable, the reason, if you look at that, that actually has clipped ceiling in it, so the reason that is lowered in order to get a width of a bedroom in there, so that already has a clipped ceiling condition in order to get the roof, in order to get the room.
My concern is this. So I want to understand what is happening. Why is this there, and why can't this happen? So without having
It's reaching to the front wall. That pitch is reaching to the front wall. The ridge and the roof behind is pitching to the previous. If I can come up to there.
Yeah.
Can I
Please do.
show them?
The pointer's at the corner there.
This pitch is relating to the front wall of the house, which is here. So it is pitching up to the front wall of the house.
But when I'm
This one is
looking at
pitching from
this,
this
I'm
wall.
sorry, but when I'm looking at the front of the building,
There is a break line there, you're just not seeing it, it's right there. There actually is a line.
but this is relating, but it's being cut off by this form. So I'm not sure I understand.
That is this one here.
um,
That's this right here, is that.
Right.
ridge.
So it's being cut off here.
It
And
hits
if-
it partway. Right
It hits a part way,
Right.
which hits it here.
Right.
But then this is in front of that.
there. Right.
So
This is coming out
not.
in front of that. This
So
is one.
then what happens?
That is the bathroom here.
There's a
It's
little
tucked in.
roof, that roof line at the top there.
Yeah, see the main roof is coming, this roof here is pitching off the front wall. This section is coming off of the backer, this reduced section here. So you have 2 pitch points. They're all coming from the back wall. It's shorter on this one than this one, so that's why you have the break that's happening at that point. That's what's developing the break.
So my other question is, you have all these bump outs that are there, and you're taking out some of these. You're placing windows right on the plate heights, and you're taking these walls out. taking the entire roof off of this building and then having these new openings and everything, the framing and,
These are existing openings. These are
yeah,
all
but this
existing.
is not, that's what I'm saying, it's not an existing. There's a bump out in the,
Oh, okay.
you know, so if you
Yeah, we
fix
could leave
that.
the bump out. We could leave it.
But what I'm saying is if you fix that, then you have to probably reframe that most probably or so. And then some,
It would still
and then
say it's
the
a bump
back
out.
area here, these are not existing.
Right.
So by taking the entire roof off, you took out 50% of the building. So any window or framing opening, essentially you're literally going over the 50%. Right?
Well,
So
there
that's what
are
I'm.
doors on the back. That's an existing door. Those are existing windows. The only one, it was one French door.
So
There
that's
are
what I'm
existing
saying. So
French doors.
have you done
I've
the
done the
study?
50%, assuming that we had existing windows here. These are all existing windows. And there's an existing French door, and we're adding one French door. I
But
did a
we-
50% count.
Yeah.
I did a 50% count.
And you don't have a window schedule, right?
I don't have one.
Yeah, yeah.
But
How necessary is that small dormer at the bottom right side of the roof?
it's for
Plan.
this bathroom. I mean, we could take it out. It could turn into a shed if you wanted to minimize its effect. It could go. That could go. I like the idea of it sort of balancing the three. If there was a reduction of one, so that there was an open section here, but it could go. I mean, it would be flexible. It could also be a shed if you wanted to minimize the effect of it.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Gregory?
No.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is the owner, Eric Hardingy. Hardingy,
Hartung,
I apologize.
no problem. It's a common situation.
Name for the record. if-
Eric Hartung, do I do address and all that too, or?
No?
Okay, cool. So I wanted to speak to a couple of things. Primarily the red dots that you can see on the exhibit. I went around and spoke to the neighbors that it's within the sight line of. Everyone on there are folks I was able to get in front of. The ones that are missing dots, I just simply wasn't able to talk to. They're either out of town or I kept missing them. So we don't even know what their opinions are, but we gave everyone two options to say they don't have an objection or that they are actually in support of the project. And you can see unanimously it was in support of the project. So
All the red dots
all the red dots are
indicate
in
support
support
for
of
the
the
project from the neighbors. Got it.
exactly. So it shows that there is a community support for it. To speak to the two-story issue, the house directly behind me and one up is a two-story. There's multiple two-stories on our street. In the neighborhood itself in Spire Heights, there's multiple two-stories on every single street, so it's not uncommon. Obviously, this is not my expertise, but it strikes me that with the kind of community support that we have in the neighborhood itself, viewing this as a more of a beautification situation, and it seems appropriate. So that's what I wanted to say. And there's a couple of neighbors that came here to kind of voice their thoughts as well.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Grant Michaels. Good evening.
Evening. My name is Grant Michaels. I'm the president of the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Neighborhood Association. Our association does not oppose second stories outright. We do want them to be particularly sensitive to the context of the neighborhood. And while this does present as a second story, this presents as a very large, dominant second story. Hearing that the design was to present the house as what would fit into a single story with a livable attic. The second story, the bay window above, the front facades, the very high pitch of the roof on all four sides clearly present that this is a second story. The dormer windows above actually have this present as a 2.5 story structure. That we consider incompatible. In general, we agree with the points raised by staff, and I simply would say in their condition 2, we're looking at the side gables as well. as those would be visible up and down the street, we would go ahead and agree that this is not compatible with the neighborhood. We would request and encourage the DRB to consider the roof forms, the front facades, and the overall height of this project. Given staff's recommendation, we support the return for redesign. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Gabrielle Lefebvre, and I apologize if I butchered the last name.
Right, it's pretty good. Gabriel Lefevre, 3471 Downing Avenue, Glendale. One of the neighbors. I feel it is appropriate for the neighborhood, and I like to see it happen. I see 1 and 2 story houses all over, and I agree with what Mike had to say with the regards to creating a nice place to live without extending through the backyard. You have to kind of go up to be able to save some space for the rear yard. So,
And you live north or south of the property?
I'm the top dot on the corner of Sunview and Downing, on the left-hand side. 3471.
Great. Thank you for taking the time to come down. Next speaker is Abigail Embargio? Imbergia. Wow, you guys have a hard,
I know.
it's a hard group to pronounce
Italian.
today.
It's Italian. It looks like Imburgia or.
Well, welcome.
Anyhow, Abigail Imburgia. I live at 3508 Downing Avenue, so I'm on the right side of the block, 3 up on the right. I feel like it is appropriate. I've been in the neighborhood nearly 15 years, so I know, I think of this as, if I look at the neighborhood as a whole, not just Downing Avenue, although on Downing Avenue, on the lower block, there are 2 two-story houses, and on the upper, there are 2. And I think this is by far the most aesthetic one that we will see if it does get approved. And just even going out throughout the neighborhood, there are some great ones and there aren't. And I just really feel like this would be a great addition. And really, like from my house, so you probably haven't seen the house, but they've put, what's the term of the flags?
Story pole.
All of that. And when you look at it, it's not, I mean, obviously we don't have finite walls. It's not very, what's the word? It's appropriate. It's not, doesn't look like it's going to be this massive thing where there are some 2-story houses in the neighborhood that's like, whoa, that's a box on top of a box. And that's not what this is. I did have another thought and I lost it, but anyhow, I just think it would really be appropriate to the neighborhood and really increase the beauty. And I feel like even just overall on the street, it could use some TLC and this would increase it. And I feel like that begets more love and care for properties. And I've seen that over the 15 years I've been there, where people start beautifying or doing remodels, and it just creates that increase in beautification. And I'd like to see that, and just for the community, and to give more work to construction companies and people in our area. That's what I like to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Garagos, any rebuttals?
It's important to keep in mind that there's stakeholders in the community that are right there on that street that made an effort to come out here and literally surrounding this property. That's important, that adjacent to this property that is in support of it and thinks it's appropriate. So while some people might have a larger concept to something, this is people who are stakeholders adjacent who think it's appropriate. So I hope that will speak to the efficacy of what we're proposing. And I think it's important that the structure be an architectural statement, and I think just lowering pitches for the sake of lowering pitches, it doesn't further architecture. And I think this style is a steep pitch style. It has shed dormers, and the character and the play of those roof forms is what adds interest to this style. And I think it is appropriate for what's happening. I hope you look favorably upon it. So, thank you very much. But yeah, a question. Tim.
Can you show me, or from there, so this is this little window here, this is the attic space? Is that what you're
Yeah,
showing?
just an attic space. Yeah.
So this one, okay.
Yeah.
It's not on the perspective.
It's not and again, it's not 2.5 stories. Those are upper vents. Those are not windows. Those are just upper vents for the attic space. So we're not trying to do 2.5 stories. Those are just gable vents, not windows. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and close the public portion unless there's anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this project itself. Okay. Mr. Malakian, you want to start us
Sure.
off?
So as usual, Mr. Garagos done a really nice design, and it's always been a very consistent overall cohesive design that he proposes. It's always challenging when you try to take a existing structure, existing bones of a structure that is completely designed and intended for a different style of architecture, and try to incorporate that into a whole new style and whole new character, adding a second floor, utilizing a lot of the openings and trying to make that with the function that is. So I commend you for that. I appreciate all the efforts that has gone into trying to incorporate some of these roof lines and some of these windows and openings that do exist, and the new ones that have come together. I also understand the concern that staff has, which I kind of have the same concern, but obviously this is not going to be the only second story, as the homeowners association representative is here, and I don't oppose a second story addition. I don't oppose even at some cases, even if it's the setting a precedent in that street context of having the first second story, as long as it's done appropriately, as long as it's done, they're cautious of what they're doing and conscious of the neighborhood and the adjacent neighbors. So I understand that the mass, the reduction of the mass is a big concern by staff. So one of my concerns, and has nothing to do with the overall design, is in the past we've looked at projects that have a lot more complete information. For me, I'm using a lot of my judgment and my imagination trying to understand this. And the packet that we have here is missing a lot of that information. So it's kind of, it makes me a little bit uneasy to kind of look at this and guess on certain things and why it's certain. Like for example, that I was asking, if I had a section, I would understand the concept behind the pitch and the height of the, and maybe we can figure out, and if I'm putting a condition on, in my head it's doable. It's not something that I'm creating some impossible conditions for this project to happen. So certain elements here, I'm a little bit concerned about, like I mentioned, the windows and the openings that are happening, because literally the entire roof of this building is coming off. The second story is coming in. So the threshold of the 50% for me is concerning, but if the architect is not concerned, then I won't really ponder upon that condition. But the idea of the mass that staff has brought, I feel there's certain areas that still can be improved and taken away to reduce the height rather than go to its maximum 28-foot height. The section that I pointed out, having the ridge to come to the end of the wall there, I understand, but is it necessary? Can it change? I don't know. I want to see what happens if we do remove that. What happens if, and if I had the sections, then I would have probably guessed right now. There's certain conditions here that are, it makes sense inside, but outside, for example, the dormer, the small little dormer window that is next for the restroom, that is right against this larger volume along the front. It's kind of out of scale, and then you got this, randomly a chimney coming out from further back. So you have these elements there that I think it takes away from the simple, clean look that, I think it's asking. Possibly if that dormer was, we had a little bit more space between the ridge here, and so this was moved in so that it actually sits alone on its own and it has a volume. So there's certain things that may be improved. You have a window here that it's you want it to push up and you want to go right at the ridge point there. I understand why these are there because of the stairs, but again, does it make sense? Can it be one larger window that it kind of plays with some of these types of windows that are there, or can it be just one round? I don't know. I don't know what these are, but these are just fine-tuning some of these elements. I don't know if bringing all these consistent pitches in will help, or it will, and I hear the architect speaking, Mr. Garagos, and I understand, it governs for that, the style that we're looking for. So it's not bothering me. It's not bothering me. But what is bothering me is that the over-excessive mass that has been created by the design in relationship to the neighborhood and the neighbors and everything. So for me, possibly if we can cut this off, lower this, and literally make this I don't know if that would help the situation, or we may come back and say, what we had originally, it was a better design. We made it worse. So I honestly, I don't know. And can it be that maybe we don't want to have this, and somehow, I see these happening, but then from the front, when you're looking at this, obviously you're looking at the elevation. You want to see the perspective, and that's another thing that, we have an older perspective. It doesn't have the windows and everything else, but, you can see everything is happening. But again, I like the roof lines that are coming, their volumes, but then the smaller little volume that is coming out for the entry, does that really help? It looks beautiful from the front, but when you look from the side, it's just a very small. So those are the things that I think maybe that may need some improvement to make this feel a little bit less massive rather than what it is now. But again, I think it's a very nice design. It's kind of unfortunate for me to kind of guess on a lot of things. I would have liked to see the existing elevation compare it to the proposed elevation and compare it to see what is actually happening, because to me, the front dormer, not the dormer, but the bay window that is there, the roof line, it seems like we're trying to reuse the existing, but it's not. It's actually a brand new roof because it's just not possible for it to work. And so that's where the question comes, what's new and what's old? How much of that is being affected? And that's my concern. But in general, going down the list of, I agree, and I think reduction of the mass would help the project, but there's not much we can do of reducing this because of the style that we're looking at. We can't really completely redesign because I really like the design. I think it's a very nice design, but again, what is going to happen if we lower that the ridge line? What happens if we get rid of that upper ridge?
Portion.
Yeah.
Okay.
How does that is that going to help? Is that going to, I think it would, but again, that's just me talking, and I can't imagine what impact it will have on the design part of it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Malikian. Ms. Arjumanian?
I love good when Mr. Milliken goes first. He covers
Most
all
aspects?
ground. Yes. I agree with you. I think as far as the mass and the scale goes, getting rid of the reach and making some little changes would definitely help. But as far as the overall design, it looks fine. And I understand if you do make those changes to reduce the mass and the scale, it may sort of jeopardize the style. So it's going to be a balance between. It's our architect would know better how to do that. I wanted to thank the owner to reaching out to the neighbors, and we usually don't see that happening before they get up here. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the neighbors coming down here, expressing their support. Overall, it's a great design. It seems to fit the neighborhood. So I tend to agree with Mr. Malikian. I understand that the mass and the scale can be reduced, but how we're going to do that and what's going to happen next, you can't really tell. So I feel like by, simple modifications to the details that's happening right now in the design, we can just address that and it would be fine.
Thank you, Ms. Arzamanian. I'm going to echo and say we very much appreciate you reaching out to the neighbors. It's always nice when that happens, and also for the neighbors taking the time to come out and support it, because most of the time what we end up happening is people coming down and objecting to a design as opposed to people taking the time, especially with young children, to come on by and encourage an owner and a design. I agree with what's been said. I think it is a well designed concept. It's not an easy one, especially when you have the openings at the lower level and you're trying to match some window lines above it, and then you're trying to fit certain bedrooms within a certain roof line that needs to be somewhat centered. It is very difficult to make this work with the style that is been kind of picked, as you might say, right? Once you have these kind of overarching pitched roofs, it's very hard to place spaces within them on the second level. I tend to go down the route of maybe approving with conditions as opposed to returning for redesign. I also think that the roof plan could be simplified. It took me a little while to get my arms around the design as well, because of the different roof pitches. And so when I'm looking at the perspective, which to me is the most telling part of really the package and the rendering, that's really where it comes together for me, because for some reason the two-dimensional aspects of it, especially with some of the lines disappearing on the roof of where one plane stops and another one merges, is very hard to comprehend without the rendering. I think I think this side facade could be simplified. I think the three windows that follow the staircase is unusual, especially as they cut the plate. So I think by maybe having a more simple window here or somewhere in this area, this facade will read better. I agree with Mr. Malekian. This additional pop-out on the porch seems to convolute things, and it could probably be simpler if this roof line kind of should probably stand on this side so staff could see it. If this roof line kind of continues, I think it'd be better served if maybe this top portion was removed and then we had a simpler ridge. And Mr. Malekian alluded to it. Now, we don't have enough sections to understand what that would do, but perhaps they could work with staff on that. And I do think that this dormer, the way it pops out, is unusual.
That would be the small dormer?
The small dormer here, yeah. I think in general, though, where we would like to see this line up, the lower level and the upper level, I think it'd be too difficult to do while still trying to keep this bedroom on the top level and still trying to get this roof pitch. So I wouldn't want to impose that. But I think some of these simpler approaches of reworking these windows, reworking the porch where it doesn't really pop out with this extra roof, trying to get rid of this little dormer and continuing the ridge, or maybe deleting that dormer. I think these are simple enough things. Now, if that, I don't know the removal of this ridge, what that would do to the space. I have no idea. And if it comes down to it, if we gotta prescribe some conditions where it's just not possible based on sections, where it becomes an unlivable space, then maybe they need to kind of either come up with something else or work with this. But in general, those would be my comments. The rest of conditions that staff has set, conditions 3 and on, seem reasonable. So I guess the first place to start is there support for?
So my question to you and the staff is that with these conditions, would staff be comfortable rather than, I mean, I know there is a reason for you guys requesting a return for redesign. Would you guys be comfortable with the conditions that we put in or the changes that we did?
If the conditions are as straightforward as I'm writing them down, sure. Because it opens up some uncertainty, and I heard Mr. Simonian say if the rooms aren't livable and that changes the design dramatically, we'd have to then bring it back to you. We can do that. I'd rather have a little more certainty visualizing what you're envisioning.
See, the thing is, and I was going to make a point of this, I want to make sure, I don't think it's fair to all the applicants that come in front of us that go through all the headache and all the requirements that they have the list of requirements. And, you know, when we are getting not a complete set, and the set that we have, then we have to guess on certain things, and we have to guess on the conditions that we're putting in, what the result is going to be.
Can you elaborate a little bit? Because I mentioned the lack of a section, but there is a section, and there's a roof plan, so it sounds like you want, because I went through the list.
Yeah, the drawings there, the drawings that we have, and it's not staff's thing, but it's more of the applicant that needs to.
So additional information.
Exactly. So applicants. So I'm not trying to say staff has taken this, but what I'm trying to say is that staff should tell the applicants that it's a complicated design, or the information you need to give more so we understand what we're reviewing. Let me give you an example. Like, for example, this dormer, right? So there's no way I can understand what the impact of this dormer is other than just looking at this. But in true drawing, that accurate drawing, you would see part of this dormer on this plan. So you would actually visualize. I can see this three-dimensionally. Or when you're looking at this attic and this window, right? So if you're cutting this through here, then you're going to see part of this roof line coming up from here. So you can see, understand, and feel what this thing is doing. And so when applicants are not really presenting the big picture for us, then we have to start guessing on certain things, right? And so one section meets the requirement, right? But you should, you know, staff should tell them, listen, you know, it's better if you want this to be, to go through smoothly, maybe add a couple more sections, maybe add some details, maybe add certain things for us to understand. Because, you know, right now if I say, let's remove this, like Mr. Simone said, I don't know what it does. I mean, can they put it somewhere else? Is that going to impact? Or if we say, if we lower this, how does that going to impact the overall? So.
And going back to the question, part of our problem, we could certainly do this with an approval with conditions if it's these kind of smaller things you're asking for. The reason, and we agree with what the commission or the board has said about the quality of the design, we found aspects of it to be a little awkward, but overall we get that it's a nice looking kind of colonial revival kind of house. But we were concerned about the massing at the second floor being quite at odds from what the board typically approves and from what our guidelines tell us to do. So if you're telling us that you're comfortable with this massing, that transfers into future design review meetings we have with applicants where we could say the board has been comfortable with this kind of thing, and maybe we don't have to push second floors in as much as we often ask people to. So that's the place I'm a little less comfortable unless you give us clear direction that you're really okay with the verticality of the side facades.
I'll speak for myself, and my colleagues can speak for themselves, but I'm okay with the second story. I appreciate staff's comment regarding massive, and that's my concern as well. My recommendation, and I think we all agreed, to cut the upper ridge to lower that. The concern that I have is I don't know it will do its job. It will reduce it enough for me to be comfortable by lowering the ridge line or changing the pitch, or I don't know. I mean, those are things that it's going to impact the design itself. So, you know, my limited knowledge of what is happening with the design of, you know, without knowing all the roof lines and everything that are coming, I thought that if we take the upper portion out, maybe that will, I don't know.
Would the board be inclined to perhaps continuing it to a date certain due to lack of information so that the applicant, I know it's kind of tricky because with our agendas it's difficult to at times get the board meeting or a date certain, but are you inclined for us to go that route, or
yeah, I think I
what's your
was kind of
comfort level?
inclined to go that route, but I think Mr. Simonio is comfortable suggesting to approve with conditions. But my concern is, would staff be comfortable taking on that responsibility for us to, you know, putting that
Yes,
on?
I can tell you that I don't think the massing's going to change dramatically by dropping the ridge on the higher ridge to the lower ridge level. It will change it to some degree, and if that's the level that you're comfortable with, if you can, I assume that's what you're visualizing the same way I am, and if that's okay, then sure, we can.
And it might simplify the roof a bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely would.
You know, you're not going to have all those different lines, and you remove some of those dormers and work on the porch. It might not be as busy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since we only have a quorum until 7 p.m. this evening, and we have a large case after this, it's already 5:55, which leaves us only about an hour for the next one. Here's what I suggest. I think more or less we had similar conditions as far as concerns and ideas. I'm hearing from staff that they will be able to work with the applicant, and I'm hoping that you get some of these conditions and you're able to come to staff with a design that is livable, that more or less doesn't change the overall style that everyone's so happy with, and we seem to like it as well. And you address what we're pointing out. Now, if at the end of the day, staff is unable to come up with some sort of a compromise, it would always come back to us anyways. And so I would suggest that we put together some sort of a condition based on our comments, or we could just have Mr. Platt read what he's got at this point in time, and then if you all are comfortable with making a motion, then we could move forward on such a case.
Okay.
Can you please go over the conditions that you have at this point?
Sure. It's a little scattered and may get a little repetitive, but I'll go through everything I've got and then we'll try to condense it. In general, simplify the roof plan. This would include reducing the ridge height of the higher portion of the roof to match the ridge height of the adjacent, or the other side of the roof. Either delete the small dormer on the front roof, or depending on how everything pans out with the changes, find another location for it. That's hard to imagine, so I picture deleting it might be the way that ends up going. Looking at the side facade on I'll call it the right-hand facade with the stair windows, there was a call to just simplify that facade, particularly the windows running up the stairway. possibly with a single decorative window in that location. We won't need to ask for more perspectives. I wrote that down, but we wouldn't ask for that for staff review. The front entry volume, the board doesn't like the way it's kind of just pushing out. It's a very shallow projection. So I think the idea is to delete that feature and find some other way to provide coverage at the front entry. A general sense of reducing the second floor mass, which will largely be covered, I assume, by the roof changes. And then I think you agreed with staff conditions 3 through 7. Got that right?
Mhm. You did a pretty good job there, Mr. Platt.
Amazing.
I'd say. Do we have some sort of motion?
I'm gonna make a motion to approve the project with the new conditions.
That was a motion to approve with condition. Do I have a second?
Do I need to pass the
Yeah.
gavel?
Yeah, pass the gavel.
I second it.
Okay. Second by Board Member Simonian, who passed the gavel. And that would be now Board Member Malikian.
No.
Okay. Board Member Arzumanian?
Yes.
Board Member Simonian?
Yes.
Board Member Malikian?
No.
Motion carries 2-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next case is PDR 1627565. And before we start, I'd like to bring something up to the public's attention in that we only have quorum until 7 p.m. this evening. Sorry about that. And so we only have quorum until 7 p.m. And this is what I suggest. I suggest that we're going to go through this as quickly as possible and everybody gets a chance to speak. And if we feel as though we're cutting it too close, then we'll basically continue the matter and we're going to cut it off at that point where the public has spoken, the architect has spoken, the rebuttals have occurred, and it's a very clean break. And at that point in time for us to move on and continue it. The other case would be is if instead of providing the public with 3 minutes each, we would, let's say, limit it to less time, 2 minutes. And if you have already heard what you're going to say, you would simply get up and say, I'm going to basically say what's already been said. So with that, I oppose the project or I support the project. And so I'm inclined to keep it at the 3 minutes, but if I get a lot of nods from everybody saying that the 2 minutes is fine and we'll try to hurry it up, we could also do that as well. I'm not getting a lot of nods. So with that, we'll continue with the 3 minutes each like we always do, and if we cut it close, we'll continue it to a date certain. So with that, we're going to open up 1627565, and our case planner is Ms. Zanti, so please take it away.
Good evening and thank you. This is a proposal to build a new 2-story, 4,114 square foot single-family residence at 1829 Kirkby Road in the R1R zone, FAR District 2. The new house will also feature an attached 3-car garage. The project involves demolition of the 2 existing residential structures on site, construction of a new pool and outdoor patio areas, and associated grading. The site is a 15,880 square foot irregularly shaped lot with double frontage on Kirkby Road. During my presentation, I'll refer to the southern portion or wider portion of Kirkby Road as Lower Kirkby, and then the portion to the northwest where the road is narrow is Upper Kirkby, just to clarify the two. The project site's currently developed with 2 residential structures, a single-family house built circa 1911, and the existing main house that was built in 1924. A historic resource assessment was prepared for the property, and determined that the two structures do not meet criteria for any national, state, or local register, and that the existing structures are not a distinctive example of the craftsman style, and no evidence was found indicating the site is associated with important events or people. As such, the structures would not be considered a historic resource under CEQA. The lot slopes up from Lower Kirkby with the two existing structures sited towards the northeast portion where there are flat terraced areas. The site features natural vegetation and a total of 14 coast live oak trees on and within 20 feet of the site. The subject property does have an ongoing code enforcement case history with the city's Neighborhood Services Division with both past and current property owners. The current code compliance case has 3 open violations listed: windows installed without proper permits, outdoor storage of construction materials on site not related to an active permitted construction site, and large holes in the yard that are not properly protected and pose a potential fall hazard. The current code enforcement case is open and on a monitoring status by Neighborhood Services. It's pending the decision of the DRB. If this project is approved by the DRB and permits are issued for construction of the new house, the 3 violations noted would be corrected with the demolition of the existing buildings and the construction of the new house. And then the current code enforcement case would be closed. As it relates to environmental review, an initial study was prepared and circulated from March 29th through April 17th of this year for the required 20-day review and comment period. The final MND has been included as attachment 5 of the staff report and includes staff's response to comments. Now, in terms of the project site planning, it is influenced by the existing conditions, which include the double frontage, the upslope topography, the irregular lot shape, the river rock retaining walls, and the oak trees on site. There's no consistent neighborhood pattern related to the garage location. The proposal features an attached garage that's located and accessed off of Upper Kirkby Road. This proposal orients the garage away from the street, which is consistent with the city's design guidelines. The property features a total of 14 oak trees on and within 20 feet of the site. 11 of these trees are located on site, and the remaining 3 are located on the adjacent properties. An indigenous tree report was prepared for this project. A total of 4 of the on-site trees are proposed for removal. Mitigation measures specified in the final MND require the applicant to obtain an indigenous tree permit and comply with Urban Forestry Department comments. Based on those comments, staff is also recommending 2 conditions of approval that relate to revising the proposed building footprint. So along the western portion, the building wall is set back at least 10 feet from the cluster of oak trees, and minimizing the driveway paving area. As it relates to the mass and scale, the surrounding neighborhood features 1- and 2-story homes, with the properties directly to the east and west being 2 stories in height. Additionally, there's a through-lot property located across the street that's 3 stories. Given this context, the applicant's proposal to build a 2-story home is consistent with the neighborhood pattern. Based off the size, the house would be the 2nd largest in the survey area. The massing of the new house, however, is broken up using a number of devices, including stepped building forms that follow the topography, hipped roof forms, change in materials, and change in facade planes. The 2nd story steps in significantly from the 1st floor along the front elevation and along the sides adjacent to the neighbors. In terms of the design and detailing, the proposed materials for the new house include cement board lap siding, flat roof tiles, smooth stucco, wrought iron railings, and a decorative stone veneer finish that's meant to mimic the existing river rock retaining walls that are on the property. The entryway is well integrated into the design. It's set back from the street and features a covered porch and recessed entry. Staff is recommending the entry door be redesigned, and that the columns at the entry be redesigned to be more consistent with the rest of the porch design. The new windows will be brown, fiberglass, block frame, and recessed, and they're a combination of hung windows and some casement. Staff is recommending 2 conditions of approval related to the windows. One has to do with the operation, to revise it to be more consistent. Preference given to the hung design, which is prominent on this proposal. And the windows details be revised to include a wood sill and frame. The elevations also indicate the wrought iron railings would have a simple vertical detail. The detail on the drawing shows a little bit different design with like a twisted iron detailing, and we would recommend that the detail of the elevations be what gets constructed. Staff is recommending that the DRB adopt the final MND for this project and approve the project with conditions as detailed in our staff report. As noted earlier in my presentation, staff did receive several comments during the initial study 20-day comment period. Copies of those comments and staff's responses are included as part of your packets. I've also placed copies of these comments up in front of you. Many of those comments were also related to the design, related to size and massing, as well as neighborhood compatibility, views, and privacy. Also in front of you, I placed a document that was submitted by the applicant last year with a staff note to the file as to what it is. With that, I conclude my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Do we
Thank
have
you.
questions for staff? Thank you.
All right.
With that, we'll start off with the applicant, Vartan Jangosian.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, board members, city planning staff. My name is Vartan Jangosian, and 1224 East Broadway, Suite 202, Glendale, 91205. I'm the designer of this building. Actually, Vista presented everything, and I like to add a little bit more about we work very closely together, considering and to preserve the lot character, making less grading job, and on this project we have only 190 cubic yard grading job to do, and mostly it's under footprint, which is not considering even grading job. We work very closely to just minimize touching the character of the property, and using the stone which is we have on the property for veneer purpose, and a character of the house is typically for that area, and the lot itself is a double lot comparing all surrounding lots, and we try to work and make a better design, and we're considering to follow all the recommendations and the conditions of the planning staff. If you have a question, I can answer.
Do we have any questions?
If you categorize or the style of the building
Can you
that
talk a little bit loud?
if you categorize the style of the home,
Style is a craftsman, which is existing house was again craftsman, and on the lot we have right now 2 buildings. I wouldn't say it's that existing buildings. It's valuable character, but it's craftsman character. And we have 2-story guest house in the back and 2-story house, which is very old and looks like it was several times, remodeled, and nothing left from the original character. And we are removing 2 buildings, which is, I would say, footprint is almost same like we put in the new house. And regarding one of the recommendations regarding to the paving for the driveway, which is existing, it's a brick paving. We try to preserve that too. But if it's needed, we can reduce that and keep some people happy.
Do we have any other questions?
one last question. You're proposing wood chimneys wood burning fireplace?
No.
That's
no,
what it's
we
shown on the
cannot,
plan.
We cannot. It's a gas burning.
So it
I'm
is a
sorry.
gas burning.
Maybe misspelled, but nobody's going to allow us to use any more wood burning.
And when you say double lot, which lot, is this part of the property, this lot?
In that IPN, it's showing like it was two lots tied together.
These two.
But right now, considering like one lot, but used to be two lots tied
Understood.
together, yes.
But you're not doing any, no
There is
portion
an-
of the building?
There is a
sits-
house right now belongs to someone else.
Okay, so when you say double lot, where
Yes.
is, that's what I'm trying to figure out, where is the double lot?
You know, even existing driveways are showing it used to be two lots.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I don't know where is that, separation line, but I know, even on the county access office showing that it was two lots, tied together, long
Understood.
time ago.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thanks.
Next speaker is Jim Cohen.
Would it be possible for Mrs. Cohen to lead off for the residents? Is that possible?
All right, we'll start off with Carla Cohen, and you have 3 minutes.
She's not happy with me about this, by the way.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good
And
evening.
Vilya, let's start the time, and we're going to keep it to 3 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll be quick. My name is Carla Bear Cohen, and I live at 1851 Kirkby, which is north of the proposed house. I've lived on Kirkby Road for more than 20 years, and the charm of the street is the abundant trees and the rural feeling of the neighborhood. It has no curbs, it has no sidewalks, very few streetlights, and it's safe, it's quiet, and it's very sweet. I know the staff has been there, but I don't believe that any of you have ever been on the street. It's a very unique, it's a very unique street, and it has quite a few unique problems to it. And I don't think that the plan is sympathetic to the old growth trees, the 100-year-old Riverwalk walls, or the safety of the neighborhood. The original driveway is down on Lower Kirkby, and that's where the driveway and garage should be. Where they have in the plan is what was made a patio about 15 years ago, and according to Neighborhood Services, that is not a driveway, and it's never been a legal driveway. The driveway is down on Lower Kirkby, where the driveway cut is, and it's marked. They just happened to move the mailbox up to where that's supposed to be a paved patio. I just would hope that they could move the garage down to Lower Kirkby, be accommodating to the old growth trees that are there, and to the flavor of the neighborhood. Which this house is like 2 times bigger than anything around it. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jim Cohen.
I assure you a more pleasant way to start.
Welcome.
Jim Cohen. I live at 1851 Kirkby with the charming lady you just heard. This project is wrong in so many ways that I'm not sure exactly where to start. Apparently, one of you have been to the property, but maybe the other 2 have not. We have letters that have been submitted from not 1 or 2, but every resident on Upper Kirkby has submitted a letter that they're not in favor of this project because of the size, because of the safety, and because it's just an inappropriate dwelling for that particular lot. The numbers that the city has compiled are, I think, misleading. Where they say that the surrounding property has two-story homes. The two-story home that's closest to this property is in fact a two-story home, but the square footage of that home is less than the proposed garage size of this new construction. So that there's in addition to the 41 or 4,200 square feet that would be going on, I think the real concern is not only Upper Kirkby, but there's a private road part of Kirkby, but there are 17 homes that converge where Upper and Lower Kirkby traffic is, and all of them are negatively affected by this blind curve. Adding additional traffic is not a good idea. I thought that possibly Neighborhood Services would have supplied you with more information. I have a copy of an email from Neighborhood Services that I'd be happy to leave with you, which says parking in the, this is from Renee, says parking vehicles in the rear unpaved area. Remove any vehicles from the rear yard area. Do not park vehicles in the rear yard area. Parking of vehicles is only allowed in the front driveway. I could bore you with 35 other pages, but every resident who has used this back patio on the upper portion of Kirkby has also been cited. And this is like an ongoing job for the Neighborhood Services. At one point, there was a discussion about putting some sort of a barricade so that the residents would not use it. And we heard back from engineering that there wasn't a budget to put any barrier there. But they also agreed that it is any additional traffic going around that.
I must cut you off.
Okay.
But I think we got the gist of it. Thank you.
But can I leave this? This has some other
Yes,
stuff
you
from
could hand
Renee.
it to staff. Next speaker is Cheryl Jillian. Welcome.
If I have any extra time, can I give it back to Jim?
Your name for the record, please.
Cheryl Gillum. I would like to share with this board some of the following from your board requirements as it relates to 1829 Kirkby Road. And this is section 3011040. It regards R1R properties. And it says, under A, number 1, every discretional decision made by the City Council, along with city boards, commissions, administrators related to the development of the R1R zones should take the following into consideration. And number B, under that, says, the development should be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of size, scale, bulk and mass, roof line, orientation, setbacks, and site level. I heard one of you say you've been on that street. Was it you?
Yes.
We own the property that is contiguous on our back and contiguous to the blind corner on the street that goes around. And the legal description for that piece of property is like a page and a half because it's like a football shape, right? You can see it right in that football shape where the yellow is the developed property.
So it's this particular one.
So it is a one-way street that goes right there. And we're right at that curve. We're that funny little football shape right there. We're right, and it's a one-way street. So item C is the site plan shall show preservation of prominent natural features, native vegetation, and open space in a manner that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, minimizing the alteration of the terrain necessary for the development. It is just my opinion that this request to build 4,115 square feet home it just does not appear to those above standards as it applies to the houses in the community. Our house was built in 1911. The majority, this was not a planned development, and there's not much of a way you can change the street or any of the other houses around there to make it conform to anything normal. What they're talking about is a patio. Since we have owned that property, that was a bridge that went from the street to, and the bridge was made by, back in the 60s, by some people that were elderly and could not go up the stairs to get to their house from the site that they're saying where the garage and driveway should be on the lower level of Kirkby. And so a bridge was put in there to help those people walk across. And maybe 30 years ago, I don't have the date, I don't have the time, I have a picture, that was illegal backfilled by the owner that was up there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that history, by the way. It's very helpful to find out about that bridge.
Thank you.
Sandra Brahmi.
Hi, I'm Sandy Green. I actually live in that home at 1841 Kirkby Road. My property obviously is contiguous to 1829, and I just want to read my statement. Well, one thing I'd like to make clear first, my home is the closest to the new development, and my home is 800 square feet. They're building something that is 4 times the size of my home. Okay, I have very serious concerns regarding my privacy with these proposed plans. After reviewing said plans and seeing the towering development markers, I find that I will lose all west and north-facing views from my home. The proposed structure will loom over my backyard with its terraced base and The existing patio at the north portion of the property is also of great concern to me. It's currently being used as a driveway. That was never structurally built to withstand being driven upon or used as an access route to the home. It completely invades my privacy as the elevation of it looks directly down into my yard and my home, including my living room, my den, and my bedroom, which is nice. Let's see. The property's driveway, curb cut, and again, as Carla said, the original post box is located on Lower Kirkby, and that's part of the 2-lane portion of the street. Keeping the driveway and the garage on Lower Kirkby would eliminate all of the marked safety issues that we have regarding the increased traffic on the Upper Kirkby's single fire lane. There's no place to turn around. There's no place to go up there. I mean, it's just the increased traffic coming down has been really a problem, safety issue-wise. I mean, I have a young daughter. She can't even play out in the front yard because I don't know if cars are going to be coming around the corner. My understanding, per City of Glendale, that this is an R1R zone, and as the developer has tried to, by the look of it, make it craftsman, I appreciate that greatly, but the sheer massive size of this definitely does not fit within the scope of the zoning regulations. The removal of many of the protected old oak trees is also not in compliance with the zoning regulations. The size of the home is preposterous. I mean, it's 4 times the size of most of the adjoining properties. The one home that they used as a reference, being a 4,000 square foot home, is not on Kirkby Road. That's on a dual lot that goes across, and it's over on Oak Knoll? What's the name of the street? Verdugo Vista. Verdugo Vista. So that house, we only see the back of that house. I'm not sure why that house is being used as a comparison with it. Anyway, it doesn't conform to the street, to Verdugo Woodlands, to my street, and it really has impacted my home. I thank you. I appreciate your time regarding this matter. I certainly hope that you would take into consideration the neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Haley?
I'm Chris Haley, and I live at 1847 Kirkby with my husband Brad Cobb. And I want to concur with the issues already being said about the trees and about the charm of the area. That's one of the reasons that my husband and I bought there, because we liked that. And so it changes the aesthetic when you build a 4,000 something square foot house and you take down trees. But our main concern is because we live right at where they would be turning in to go into their driveway, and that's exactly where we park in this way, and then they come around, and so they're driving right behind our cars. And the negative impact that that would cause, the congestion, the added cars, I personally have been negatively impacted by that many times. In fact, there was a couple living there, a man and a woman at one point, and the woman was having a hard time. I'm watching out my window as she's trying to navigate backing out of this driveway, and she's really close to our cars, the back end of them, and I'm thinking, I hope she's not going to hit them. And lo and behold, she did, because I come out later and there's a scratch going this way across my bumper, which I had newly painted because I've made my own scratches on it. But then all of a sudden, 3 months later, I get this new scratch that's going this way. And that just creates ill will between neighbors. You don't need that. It's not necessary. They have a driveway that's down in Lower Kirkby. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Crystal Martinet.
She and the little one had to run
Oh,
off to
okay. And is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this case? So with that, we'll go back to the applicant for rebuttal, if necessary. Mr. Jungosian?
Actually, and forgive me, Chair Pro Tem Simonian, I have been told that we should, if we are going to continue this case, we should probably continue it without closing the public testimony and without having the rebuttal.
Okay.
So,
Well,
unless you prefer to,
I say we could get this done in a half an hour. I'm hopeful, because I don't want to make everyone come back another evening. So with that,
That's right.
do you have a short rebuttal?
Honestly,
Because I have a couple of questions.
some of the comments I didn't hear even, but I like to make a kind of telling the first design which we make it. The garage was from Kirkby side.
The lower Kirby.
Lower portion. But that time, house was becoming like almost 3-story. The best solution was to make the other driveway using without making, again, major grading work. Even now, we can do the garage subterranean, but it's going to be tremendous grading job. We're going to damage a lot of trees, and I don't know how much that's going to be helping. That the complaints about the garage blocking the view or other things. Right now, we have a guest house right there. It's a 2-story. And I don't believe this house making anybody's, view, obstructing the view or making to look bad. Because right now, again, I'm mentioning, it's a huge guest house, 2-story. It's right.
We can't have cross communication. We cannot have, sir, please.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
That guest house is a 2-story. First floor is like a storage, and on top, we have a 600 square foot guest house, which looks bigger than existing house we have there. So I cannot understand obstructing the view, because the guest house is there. If we're not going to move that, it's not going to change anything. So that is my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We might have a question for you,
Right time?
Mr. Jungosian? Yes. We might have questions for you. Do we have questions for the architect? No. I was going to ask a question about the lower driveway and the lower garage, but you already answered my question about the 3-story mass, and that's why you didn't want to put it down there. I thought we had questions for you, so I apologize. Thank you very much. Sure. So with that, I'd like to close the public portion, and let's try to come up with a,
Okay.
let's try to wrap it up this evening if possible,
So,
Mr. Malakian.
I appreciate neighbors coming out, and it's always a challenge when we have a project that is being proposed in a site that utilizes pretty much most of the FAR that it's allowed. So that's always been the challenge. And unfortunately, for the rest of the neighborhood, this particular property is the largest property. So without the applicant, without asking for any kind of a variance, they are proposing what by right they're allowed to do. And our challenge is to make sure what is being proposed is appropriately situated, designed appropriately, and fits within the neighborhood. I like the site planning. I appreciate the proposal of creating levels that has minimized the amount of grading. And I appreciate the intent of the style that it's being proposed. I don't think if we reduce this any square footage will reduce the mass that neighborhood is looking for. So my challenge right now is to look at the design and address what I see that it's not really working out, in my opinion, and we can go from there. The reason that I asked the architect the style, because right now when I'm looking at the style that is being proposed, to me, it's not a true craftsman. What it's there now, and being in the woodland, it is an appropriate style, I agree. It is a very, it has a lot of various features that will, if it's done appropriately, it would complement the surroundings and the neighborhood. The intent, as I said, the intent, the site planning of utilizing the different elevations are commendable. And I agree the location of the garage, I think by placing it up on higher level, it will allow a better access both for the street as well as the obviously for the owner. But there are certain features that the typical craftsman style home requires for it to be a true craftsman. Low pitch roof, gable or hip roofs, deeply overhang eaves, not covered or stuccoed or exposed rafters. The front porch should be essentially part of the roof overhang, or the building roof overhang. The columns should be tapered, square tapered columns rather than stuccoed columns. So those are very basic craftsman details that I think it requires for it to kind of bring in, for it to be essentially what it's being called for. Stucco is probably the last material you want to use in a craftsman style home. The windows, the dividers, it's more of a contemporary windows that are being proposed. The moldings, the sill. So all of these features that are being proposed should be replaced with the true craftsman concept. As far as the over excessive driveways that would minimize the amount of impact to the oak trees or the adjacent property oak trees. I agree with staff. I think there are room that if there are ways that we can massage the building itself to minimize the impact as much as possible, I support that. Overall, I'm not opposing the size of the home, but I'm concerned about the materials, the style that is being proposed. That it looks overwhelming. It looks very massive in comparison to if the style was done properly, the detailing was done properly. I think it would complement the size, and the size will disappear in my opinion, and it would not be a out of place kind of a style that is being proposed right now in that location. That's what
Thank you, Mr. Malakian. Ms. Arzumanyan?
Again, agreed. And I think I've also been to the site, so I don't think the proposed plan does not fit the neighborhood. And I think it's designed well. And I was just reading the conditions as when the staff is referring to revising the details of the windows and the static part of it, that I believe will help improve the project and the design. As far as the parking and garage goes, I agree with the staff. I think the architect, they drive to minimize removal of the trees. So, I mean, I think that's the way to go. So, in order to minimize the impact on the trees, this was the right decision. I like the design. I think it does fit the neighborhood, and also as far as the mass and the overall volume goes, it's a big property in that neighborhood, and I don't know how it could be dramatically reduced. That's where I'm at. I don't have any particular concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Arzumanyan. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and sharing with us really the problems associated with the specific street and also some of the history. It's very helpful for us. I agree with my colleagues in that the site planning and the way the house is situated and the way that you, as the applicant, have worked so diligently to reduce grading is the right approach. We always like it when architects take the time to really work with the existing contours of the site to minimize grading, because especially on streets like this, when you have many truckloads of earth being excavated and removed, it is a serious hassle for the adjacent neighbors, especially on a narrow street. And so minimizing grading is a top priority. The architect brought up some thoughts as to why the garage was placed in upper Kirby as opposed to lower Kirby. And it seems as though the majority of the comments that have been brought forward this evening have been that the garage being placed at upper Kirby creates an issue as far as access, etc. On the other hand, and that's what's fun about this board, right? And I say fun, and I might be facetious in that we get to look at things from all angles. And on the other hand, if you move the garage onto lower Kirby, you're going to end up with a 3-story home. I'm looking at the curb height at lower Kirby, and it's at 101, say 100, and the finished floor of the first level is 112. So the first floor is 12 feet above the curb. And so if you put a garage in lower Kirby, you're going to end up with 3 stories on the Kirby side, which is not a good precedent. And so as an architect, I appreciate the gesture and the thought process of not wanting to create the 3 stories of mass and moving it up there. Now, on the other hand, I think if you are moving the garage on the upper Kirby, you got to have adequate turnaround space within the property. So cars are more, I guess the ownership would be more inclined to pull into the garage as opposed to park on the driveway. And then when you're coming out of your garage, you'll be able to turn around to leave, in which case you're not impacting the neighbors as much. And frankly, you want to have that as an owner because then you can park your cars inside the garage as opposed to leaving it outside and having to get dirty all the time. And so I think if the garage is kept in its upper portion, then those radiuses need to be massaged to provide for more of a radius because it is a very impacted portion of Kirby. So those are my thoughts on Kirby. Insofar as the style is concerned, I think if you squint your eyes, you kind of see the resemblance of a craftsman, but it certainly is not a craftsman in its true sense. And if that is the style that we're going after, then we need to have some more craftsman elements to it, especially because it's a large home. Then it needs to look more like a craftsman as opposed to somewhat of a craftsman and somewhat of a Mediterranean, let's say, something in the middle. Overall, though, the way the architect has designed the mass and has broken up the building, I think is very successful. I think when I look at the elevations, it's the mass of it and the bulk of it works. And the way you've done the access to it and the stairs to it and the way you've worked with a very challenging site is positive. And so overall, I think that I support the general site planning. But as I indicated, I would work more with the turnarounds and how to make that garage as compatible as possible so the owners are motivated to go in the garage, park inside the garage, and not have to fear getting hit every time you're backing out. Insofar as some of staff's comments, the smaller comments, I think are spot on. And so I think in general, I'd like to take a moment just within our board here to try to assess some sort of direction that we want to take this evening.
Should we go down the list of the conditions? This is wrong.
From staff or?
So, did you write down the stuff that we?
I tried, did my
I
best.
guess, yeah, can you share with us some of the conditions that are in addition to what's been already typed out for us here?
Yeah, we talked, before going into the style, talked about making sure the driveway has adequate turnaround space to make the garage usable. It looks like it may have that, but we'll do radius checks and make sure that that's true.
I think what I'm getting at is, I think what the architect has designed meets code, by all means. I don't doubt that. And from what it looks like, it does meet code. But I think it needs to go beyond that in order for it to really work with that blind corner. So that's the thought there,
Yeah.
without dwelling on it too much.
Yeah, there is a bit of a hammerhead, so we can see if that's going to work and what else they could do. In terms of stylistic changes, the things I heard were, in general, just bringing this design closer to the standard kind of features that we see on traditional craftsman houses, a lower pitched roof, the bigger overhangs on the eaves, exposed rafter tails, which could entail, for fire reasons, we'd have to have heavier timber or whatever it would take to achieve that and meet code. The porch should be, the entryway area where there's this little gable should actually, the entire porch should kind of be embraced by the roof rather than have this separate little roof.
And if there, I think it governs for it to be a little bit more interesting. If they want to do that, I would probably use some sort of a post and beam, kind of an open, like an open, kind of an exposed trellis, kind of or a truss looking element there that comes out, which sits on tapered columns, square tapered columns with the stone base. I mean, a true craftsman style, they can make a quick trip down to Pasadena, they'll find a lot of them out
Right.
there.
Yeah, and we'll help. And I have the columns should be tapered. Don't use stucco. One thought would be the upper level could be shingled, the lower level could be horizontal siding,
Right.
something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The windows are too contemporary. I assume you mean that they should have divided lights, at least in part of the sash.
I think it would govern.
Possibly also craftsman style trim
Right.
around the windows. And that is everything that I had.
One thought, Mr. Malikian, and I know, you put these conditions forward, is, at times we've seen a little more of a contemporary version of a craftsman, where it has all the attributes that you're referring to, but it ends up having, let's say, windows without the muttons, and it ends up, having a little more of a crisper look to it. Would something like that, you think, provide some more flexibility for applicants, so, they're able to?
I mean, again, if they're going that route and being, without muttons and just be casement, let's say, casement windows, I think the proportions should be
More
done
in line with the
in line
craftsman
with craftsman
style.
than just a standard off-the-shelf kind of a size of windows that are placed in. So I think symmetry is important in the style. So there's a lot of these elements there that I think play a big role in creating a really nice, truly beautiful craftsman design.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where that left us, to stick with the more traditional.
I mean, they can. I mean, if they are going to go with a simpler square, but then the proportions are going to be very important, for it to look right. You would probably have a wider profile of aluminum or not, I think they're using fiberglass, if I'm not mistaken. So it'll be wider profile windows with the small, so the proportions of the windows are going to be important, rather than just a simple, thin aluminum windows that are kind of sandwiched or against a molding around them. So I think by adding that additional material there and rather than the stucco, I think it would definitely help bring the character of the true craftsman.
And we'll make sure that the windows are recessed a
Yeah.
decent amount and kind of following the traditional lines that we know.
Is there anything else in addition to the staff recommended conditions that were spoken of this
I
evening?
think I've read everything that I jotted down.
Okay.
Anyone get anything else?
That's what I have.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then we can also just take the general, we're very familiar at staff with what is a traditional craftsman, so we can work with the architect to apply things that we may not have heard if he chooses to go with other things.
And the rest of the conditions as staff has put forth, does the board find those acceptable?
Well, I think if most of the conditions that staff has, I think if they do follow the craftsman, I think it will address pretty much everything that is down here, so.
Yeah, I want to, I'm wondering if it makes sense for me to open up with one question to the architect, because I feel as though we're very much, leaning towards a craftsman style. And it seems as though by the time we're done with these conditions, this is going to be a craftsman home. And you could nod if and I just wanted to make sure that that is what the owners and the architects feel as though you could work with and produce a craftsman design. I can't have cross communicate. You could come up for a second and answer my question, and I'm doing this in a way of protecting you, because we're putting together very specific conditions here on a craftsman. So I just want to make sure that you're comfortable moving forward as a craftsman design, because you're going to be working with staff to try to
I
accommodate
wouldn't say
these.
it's a typical craftsman style. It's a kind of modernized, craftsman with, that the character was like work for wood area, just forest. If we go like a typical craftsman, we need to do a lot of detailed work, and it's, I don't know, that's up to you. Again, I'm willing to work.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
hear.
Yes. But if we can keep closer to this character, because we were kind of compromised with the owner, with the city,
I
with
understand.
everybody. Yeah.
It just seems as though the board is leaning towards a very strong craftsman look and a craftsman feel, and so I just wanted to see if there were some serious
Since I'm
objections
here,
on
I'd
that
like to
end.
mention about the parking.
Yes.
Turnaround.
Yes.
If you see the site plan, we provide that turnaround.
I know you have a hammerhead up there. I just think
So we'll
it could get
minimize the
bigger.
pavings over there, and
Yeah, I think you have a retaining wall on the lower side. If you increase that retained
Yes.
area, even a few feet more will provide them with the opportunity to really do a turnaround, because they gotta do a 3-point turn to get out of their garage and face their cars, moving forward. And in order to do a 3-point turn, you need a big area to try to do that. So every time you're backing out, especially if you have kids in the car, it's just unsafe, right? So that's what I'm talking about.
we will do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then with that, yes?
I would like to just point out to the board that there are several conditions, specifically conditions 7, 8, and 9, as relate to the environmental.
17? Oh,
7, 8,
environment.
and 9.
Last
That-
page of the staff report.
Well,
So
7
those-
deals with the MND that we would have to
Correct.
approve first.
Correct, and so the fact that the other conditions the board felt are not necessary, given the change to the craftsman look.
No, we're maintaining
You're
the staff
maintaining the
conditions.
staff, all right, just point, good, thank you. So yes, the board would have to vote on the environmental and approve those conditions.
Yeah, okay, so the idea is we're adding new conditions as prescribed earlier, and in addition, adopting staff's conditions. And so, based on that.
Yeah, I'm okay with 7, 8, and 9.
Do I have, well, first we need to approve the mitigated negative declaration, and on that, could I have, could someone move to approve the MND?
I'll move to approve the MND as stated. Yes.
Second.
Board Member Arzumanian?
Yes.
Board Member Malikian?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Simonian?
Yes?
Okay, so the final MND's been adopted. Now on to the
I would like to make a motion to approve the project with stated conditions.
second.
I'll second.
Board Member Arzumanian?
Yes.
Board Member Malikian?
Yes.
Board Member Simonian?
Yes.
Okay, so the project is approved with the conditions as stated.
Thank you. We have some minutes. Do we have quorum on the minutes?
Yes, we do. These would be the minutes from the Design Review Board meeting of March 8th, and board members Arzumanian, Benlian, Simonian, and Malikian were present.
And
So
which cases were those?
This would be.
This isn't the ones that Mr. Bellion had wanted to make comments on, was it?
No, those were the meeting minutes from the 12th.
I see. Oh, this is where we had one case.
Correct, there was just one case on Gardner Place.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
I have a motion by Board Member Malikian.
Second.
And a second by Board Member Arzumanian. Board Member Arzumanian?
Yes.
Board Member Malikian?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Simonian?
Yes.
The motion passes 3-0. I'm looking at staff, no other staff announcements? No,
No.
There are no other staff announcements, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
With minutes to spare.
Exactly.
Oh my God, 4 minutes.